Good evening, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is August 24th. It's a very exciting day, lots of change around here. I'm joined, as usual, by the Western Standard's Cory Morgan. And this is actually Cory's first day in a new role as senior columnist.
Yes. So, new but reduced role. I'm sliding backwards. It's a devolution.
He was not demoted. This is just Cory wanted to step back a bit from being here every single day. It'll be more of a part-time thing. And actually some good news for you. We received a lot of really heartfelt, some very interesting emails and messages about people who are upset that Triggered was being canceled. And one woman in particular, Janet something, she offered to buy a piece of Cory's clipped off tie, and she missed the show so much already. And so I was convinced that we're actually going to, by popular demand, bring Triggered back already. It's only been off for a week. We're going to bring it back as a once a week show. Probably going to be still on Wednesdays as normal. Cory, maybe just say something quickly about what Triggered is going to look like.
Sure. I mean, we might, Nico and I are going to work on that through the week. Might rebrand a couple of things. It'll be weekly. I think we want to stick to the live thing because that was a lot of what our show was about, was the interactivity with the audience and that. And the regular viewers watched it on their lunch break. So we're looking at the same time slot. Mm-hmm. Just once a week on Wednesday, we'll break up the week and have a similar show to what I did before.
Yeah. I'm really excited about it. Speaking of changes, the guy who's coughing beside me here, Nigel Hannaford. Nigel, this is his first day as the new opinion editor of the Western Standard. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Derek. It's great to be back in Alberta media again. It's been a while.
You know, I can't think of a more English name than Nigel. Maybe Archibald.
I've never met an Archibald, but there are Nigels everywhere. Once there were 3 of them in the Prime Minister's office, so there you go.
There you go. So, Nigel, as people have alluded to, just some of his past comes to us with really just a wealth of experience. Was a senior columnist, a member of the editorial board at the Calgary Herald.
That's right.
And then after that, 2009 to 2015, the senior speechwriter and manager of the speechwriting office in the Prime Minister's office of Stephen Harper.
That's correct.
So we're really fortunate to have someone as experienced and, dare I say, seasoned. That was not an old joke. Seasoned as Nigel coming on as our opinion editor. Very excited. And it was actually a great day to have both Cory and Nigel in the office because Dave had to duck out early. So it works out well. Okay. We've got some interesting topics today. We've been saying it for a while that Europe, Germany in particular, but Europe in general, is captive to the real cudgel that Russia holds over it, which is natural gas. Europeans will freeze without natural gas. A lot of us have been talking, not just in the Western Standard, but just anyone with common sense saying, well, why doesn't Canada, which is a natural gas superpower, export to Europe? And we had the German chancellor in town not in town, but in Canada just yesterday. And he was quite explicit that he wants to see Canada exporting liquefied natural gas to Europe. And Justin Trudeau just says, no, you're going to keep getting it from the Russians or you're going to freeze in the dark. So we're going to talk about that. As well, we're going to talk about a very, very serious scandal. Everyone talking about HANDSHAKEGATE. You see, Pierre Trudeau shook the hand of a guy at a campaign event, and doesn't matter, there was one of several thousand people. This guy, the media say, is a bad guy, and therefore Pierre Poilievre is a racist and sexist and misogynist and Islamophobe, or whatever these things are. The media have absolutely had a meltdown over HANDSHAKEGATE. We're going to talk about what the hell this controversy is. Is it a real controversy? Spoiler, it's not. And what's it saying about the state of the media and the more leftward political parties right now as they absolutely wring their hands over HANDSHAKEGATE? Before we get into it, though, I want to thank my favorite sponsor, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I've been a member of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association I can't even speak today. I've been a member of the CSSA for over a decade because I trust them with my membership dues to protect my rights as a law-abiding firearms owner in Canada. Without the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, the federal government would have seized our lawful firearms long ago. They're still moving at it. They're now, the federal government has shut down the ability to import handguns into Canada. Thank God, I may have theoretically, but not confirmed, bought a lot of handguns right after I announced that they're going to bring in the bill to do so. They have now, without even passing legislation, using some regulatory loophole they use to ban us from having free trade in cheese, use that to stop us from bringing new lawful firearms into Canada so that only the criminals can have handguns in Canada. And the CSSA is on the front lines of this, making sure not just that the politicians are as educated as they can hopefully make them, but making sure that the public is educated, that the public understands as much as we reasonably can that the government can't solve crime by taking guns out of the hands of registered, lawful, and licensed firearms owners. If you're not a member of the CSSA yet, you should be. Go to cssa-clia.org and become a member right now. It's worth every penny. Without them, you'd already not have any right to lawfully own firearms in Canada. Hey, soon enough, maybe I'll just be a criminal and I'll just have to own my guns illegally. I think we'll all be that way soon enough. But thankfully, we've got groups like the CSSA that are standing on guard for thee. All right, so we're going to get into it. We've been talking for a very, very long time now about building energy infrastructure, pipelines to get Western oil and gas from here to there, to the East Coast, so that we can export to European and African markets. We had Energy East, and that was, they pulled the pin on it themselves because the federal government destroyed any business case for it. Now we had Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, and this is not a very conservative guy. He's a social democrat in a coalition with the Green Party. And I tell you, you think our Greens are crazy. You should see the German Greens. This is literally the original Green Party in the country. These guys make Elizabeth May look like Stephen Harper. It is, they're absolutely nuts. And even that government is saying, we need Canadian liquefied natural gas. Justin Trudeau says, no, there's no business case for it.
And I say, if there is no business case, then it is because of the policies and the actions of the Canadian federal government. Under the Harper administration, there was every incentive, every encouragement for Western producers to drill for oil, drill for natural gas, to build the pipelines that it took to get to market. As soon as the present Liberal government came into office, the first thing they did was scrap the Northern Gateway gas pipeline that would have taken natural gas from Alberta, northeastern BC, to the coast for sale offshore. It was fully permitted and ready to go. It was just canceled. The second thing they did was to review Energy East. That was TransCanada's pipeline to take gas in the other direction. And what did they do? They basically ragged it to death with regulations. Every time you turn around, there needed to be a new study. There had to be something else that needed to be done. And in the end, after sinking literally billions of dollars into the regulatory process, TransCanada, and nobody blamed them, said, we've had enough, and there it stopped. So now, by the way, that pipeline, if it had been done according to the schedule that had been laid down, that would have been in operation by now for 2 years, and it would have been in a position to relieve the distress and misery that Germans are likely to experience this winter unless they can find gas from somewhere else.
That sounds like a good column to write about. Where would we be right now?
It's actually half written.
Pardon?
It's actually half written.
Oh, see, look at it. See how efficient this guy is. That's beautiful. Yeah, right now, the German government is actually rationing natural gas right now so that they can try and build up their reserves for winter. They're planning on they're trying to make sure people don't freeze. And I mean, it's third world kind of stuff you'd expect. Now, the Germans are to blame for a lot of this. Their radical push towards green energy there has been a disaster. They're now reopening coal-fired power plants because they shut down all their nuclear. But now, this is not, Corey, just us saying it anymore. It's not just right-wing oil baron Albertans saying it. You've got the left-wing, very green chancellor of a European left-leaning country saying to Trudeau, he was saying in pretty clear, diplomatic and friendly language, but he was pretty explicit in his press conference and then in an interview with the CBC afterwards. They want this done. That Germany is right now building the infrastructure on its North Sea coast to be able to receive LNG by sea, and saying it's time to go forward. And he intimated as much himself. Do you think this is going to significantly change the conversation around, say, restarting Energy East? Now that it's not just us, it's now a major NATO ally and G7 country from and a left-wing one at that, saying we need to do this and Canada could step up.
Trudeau has shown he is completely ideologically blinded. No matter how desperate the need of an apparent allied country to get this, no matter how much the economics are so stark and clear with the need for this product to get out there, he refused to acknowledge that there might be a need and fumbled along and said, we might have some hydrogen that you don't want in a couple of years. We have it. It's sitting there. He's sitting on it. I mean, talk about it. They call conservatives heartless. That's heartless. When you would sit there and say, we're going to let you suffer as a dependency of Russia in the midst of this crisis, potentially freezing this winter, refiring your coal plants, and they're talking about stockpiling firewood, for crying out loud, and to say there's no business case to get that gas to you. There were, since 2015, 18 proposed LNG terminals in Canada. 5 of them would have been on the East Coast. Some of these would presumably be near done by now. And this government has hindered and held up and pushed them all out of viability. The companies didn't propose them because they didn't think there was a business case. They realized, and that was at lesser gas prices than now. He basically either outright lied to say there's no business case, or he just doesn't know. And both are believable.
Well, let's face it, Mr. Trudeau, when he talks about economics, this is a man who said that budgets balance themselves. He said he doesn't think about monetary policy. I have a strong feeling that his opinion on whether there's a business case for these projects better left to the people right down the street here in Calgary in the T2P, where they actually know how to build pipelines.
Well, I think there is something, you kind of alluded to this yourself in your earlier remarks. There is no business case for it, but there is no business case for it directly because of government. In the absence of government, there's clearly a business case for it. The market has said, we want to do this. Investors put down billions of dollars to make this happen because in the absence of government interference, there was a business case for it. It is only in the environment that Trudeau has created that there is no business case. Now, Germany, if you look on the map, is to the east of Canada. Is it fair to say that Justin Trudeau is saying, let the eastern bastards freeze in the dark?
I was just trying to think of what the German would be for that, and I hadn't quite got as far as Google Translate. But
it'll take me a while, but I can figure it out.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll work that in.
Yeah. I think that's maybe a headline for your column. Yeah. Trudeau says, let the German bastards freeze in the dark.
But really, when you get right down to it, there is nothing funny about this. What we are saying is, don't look to Canada for anything. Everybody knows that when it comes to the military contribution to the NATO alliance or to helping out the Ukraine, this government is not prepared to do much. No reflection on the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces. We visited them in Afghanistan. We know what they're capable of. They are brilliant in the field, but the government is not giving them the support. Now, if it's an entirely peaceful thing, okay, some governments have a problem with war. Maybe we have one that has a problem with actually supporting its armed forces. But this is not a war thing. This is, buddy, my kids are going to freeze. Send me the natural gas. What if we can't count on Canada to do that? If we can't, can we not count on Canada to export food? Or maybe that's something else we're going to have to talk about.
Well, farmers are the next enemy.
Farmers are the next enemy. Like, what are we good for?
This would be, getting natural gas to Europe is the perfect way to strike at Putin where it would actually hurt.
Yes.
Where you can, the Russian war machine is fed on LNG exports to Europe. You have the Nord Stream pipeline, things like that. It is directly feeding the Russian war machine. You want to hurt the Russian war machine, much better than sending anti-tank missiles and guns and things like that to Ukraine. Much better would be to help Europe not need to buy a single ounce of LNG from Russia. This would be the single strongest thing we can do now to hurt the Russian war machine and to support European allies, but we seem unable to.
Derek, we should do that without not doing the other. They do need the rockets, they do need the armaments, but they do need the natural gas. And you're right. If you interrupt the market out there, bring the prices of Russian product down, I mean, they'll look for other customers, and no doubt we'll find them. But you know,
but they'll be getting a lot less for it.
But they'll be getting less for it, and that will impair their ability to pursue the war in Ukraine. No, 100%.
Yeah. Well, let's go from the war in Ukraine and Eastern bastards freezing to the media meltdown over HANDSHAKEGATE. So, you know, we've had a fair bit of coverage on this, not because we think it's actually a story. We've covered it. What we've actually covered is more of the mainstream or legacy media's reaction to the story. So long story short, Pierre Poilievre is having some kind of campaign event in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Anyone who's been to a Poilievre rally or seen video of them knows that they're pretty big and rowdy affairs, very freewheeling. When Poilievre was in Calgary, we covered it, and there was, by our estimate, about 6,000 people there. Could have been more, could have been less, but probably around 6,000. And Poilievre, at the end, stands there at the end of a queue, and anyone who wants to shake his hand gets to shake his hand. And I've been a politician. I hated that part. Now, I don't know how he does it for like 3,000 or 4,000 people a day. He has probably shooken many, many tens of thousands of hands throughout the course of the campaign. And so what happens in Dartmouth is some guy, Mackenzie, what's his name? Something Mackenzie.
Jeremy Mackenzie.
Jeremy Mackenzie. He apparently, I've never heard of the guy, but he leads some curious online group that has a fictitious kind of joke country, and they post memes about the government. He is charged with criminal mischief or something of the kind for organizing a protest outside the Nova Scotia's chief medical officer's home, which I don't think is a nice thing to do. I think those people should be held accountable. I think they've done terrible things. But, you know, I've never been a fan of taking this to somebody's home. So he's facing that. And then the lefties allege there's a much worse things, and I don't know if those things are true or not. I have a hard time believing a lot of what they say. But let's just assume for a second here, he is a really bad guy. He's a real racist. Well, he shook Poilievre's hand. There's a picture of him shaking his hand, and the media blew up. Press Progress, a Marxist propaganda site, went nuts about this. Global News has gone nuts about this. Most of the mainstream media has gone absolutely nuts of this. Corey, do you think there's actually a real story here?
Not at all. It's purely media created BS, and I don't know. I'm so sick of the legacy media. You know what? When they overreach and they embarrass themselves like this, because they really have. Your average common sense Canadian, I'm sure they even know. I mean, even if they don't like Poilievre or they think this man is odious, realize it's a guy shaking a hand. How's he supposed to know? None of us knew who this guy was he shook a hand with, and to hold that against him is just beyond the pale. And you know, it's poor media. I mean, that was written as a news with Rachel Gilmore. So, you know, behind the man who shook Poilievre's hand. I mean, that was the title for this thing. Where are you guys going? And that's when I responded to her and showed a picture of Trudeau with a close-up picture smiling next to Mr. Lowe, who was Terry Lowe, who was not Terry Lowe. Either way, he was a notorious pedophile who got convicted in Alberta.
Oh, I remember this. Yes.
And
well, that,
said, do you want to carry on with this game?
That makes Justin Trudeau a pedophile then,
yeah,
right?
and of course it doesn't. I got all sorts of beefs with Trudeau. I'm just showing the ridiculousness if you really want to go down this rabbit hole and play this game on where every association is going to be smeared on the other person. Let's play with your buddy Trudeau and do that. And of course, she wasn't impressed with that. But it's just petty and ridiculous, and I'm getting sick of it. And I think a lot of Canadians are.
Oh, you're so right. A lot of Americans too. It's not like this is a problem that's exclusive to north of the border.
Yeah.
But you know, having put 34 years into the legacy media in one form or another, it really saddens me that this has become so common. And the reason it saddens me, I mean, now that I'm in independent media, these are our competition. I suppose we should, we shouldn't be too sad if they make a mess of things. But if you care about democracy, if you care about good government, then you have to have people watching what politicians are doing. And if they do it in a way that is unfair, patently ridiculous, as this is, you do not have to be a partisan for one side or the other to say, well, at a big rally, somebody comes up and shakes your hand and a picture is taken. There is no commitment in that. There is nothing to explain. And if you pretend that there is, well, you're not helping. You're just undermining, taking the bricks out from the platform from which you speak and which, frankly, we need you to speak if the system is going to work.
So, the media, as it is today, driven by clicks, and no one's immune from that. Even the Western Standard, we need people to read our content, watch our videos. It's the lifeblood of media. The downside is sometimes you can become a little too slavish to it, that you're willing to do anything to get to it. Corey's been around here and he's seen me say no to headlines or stories that we think are going to get a lot of clicks, but I just don't think are correct, newsworthy stories. And we've nixed them, even though that would be maybe a bad business decision. We saw it as an appropriate editorial decision. And I think we're just not seeing that kind of responsibility in newsrooms now. And you've been in this position in the legacy media. It's difficult to say no to a salacious story that's maybe just not actually real news, though, right?
Well, it is, but sometimes you have to. And even like, what's salacious? This isn't even salacious.
No.
This is just foolish. Anybody could look at that and say, well, I don't know. It doesn't look like they know each other. They shook hands. There were 3,500 other people behind him, or whatever it was in Nova Scotia there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when even people who don't follow news can see how stupid a story is, then you really have done a stupid story.
But then the media, they actually seem a bit sheepish about it now. I think.
They're doubling down.
Oh, no, they're doubling down because they know they're wrong. Rather than say, you know what, we flubbed this one. Maybe we were just being a bit too slavish to try and get clicks. You know what, maybe we flubbed this one. They have doubled down, saying this is absolutely important. He deserves answers. Then there's the politicians on the other side. Now, give a little bit more grace there. Yes, I am saying give a little more leniency to Singh and Trudeau, but hear me out. Hear me out first. This is just what they do. Politicians are programmed to attack the politicians on the other side, no matter what. It's what they do. The odd, rare time, say the Liberals are correct on something, Conservatives attack them anyway, often, very often. There's just not a lot of charity given. But sometimes it can rise to a particular level of hypocrisy. So let's talk about the Liberals and the NDP here. We're going to come to the Liberals in a bit, but let's talk about NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but I was reading it today as I was writing a column on this. He was saying, Oliver knows who he is. He needs to denounce him. If he doesn't, he is winking with white supremacy. So Singh says, if you shake someone's hand, you're responsible for what they say unless you very particularly denounce them, even though this is like a nobody. Funny thing, though, because in 2015, Jagmeet Singh spoke. He went all the way down to San Francisco from Ontario, Brampton, Ontario. He goes all the way to San Francisco, speaking at a Sikh Khalanistani independence rally. Where you've got guys brandishing swords in a crowd, and you've got a big giant poster of a known terrorist, and he speaks at the rally. We've seen before which
is a lot more than just
shaking a random person's hand.
He's part of the action. Right?
Yeah, and he's been asked, once he started running for the NDP leadership, he was asked by Terry Malinsky at CBC, who actually did ask him some pretty tough questions because of this rally and the connections that Jagmeet Singh does have and he asked him if he would denounce, I can't pronounce the name, but the guy who masterminded the Air India bombing in the 1980s, the biggest single terrorist attack in Canadian history, killed well over 200 Canadian citizens, 300 people. And Jagmeet Singh refused to denounce a known terrorist who is the biggest mass murderer in Canadian history. I mean, I know hypocrisy is not in short supply in politics, especially Canadian politics. This has got to reach a new level, Nigel.
Well, I'm sure it does. That's and if you take the pulse and if you look at the people who have come up and stood beside prominent politicians, had their picture taken, go back, put it on the wall, claim to be a special person in that individual's life. Maybe they're the ones who do they really want to know, subscribe to everything that politician has said? Good question to ask on some days. But when you cannot find it in you to condemn, not criticize, condemn somebody who has put a bomb on a plane and brought 329 people to what is apparently a pretty nasty death, then you have to ask, maybe you should be quiet about other people and who they shake hands with at busy rallies. Stick to your own conscience.
Cory, do you think Jagmeet Singh's maybe exposed himself here a little too much, or are his supporters just gonna
I don't
shrug
think people took him too seriously anymore anyways. He's got that core of NDP support. He hasn't been gaining anybody new. But what I'm looking at with this whole denouncement trend too, and it's part of the cancel culture mob. They got the pitchforks out. They've got them lit. It's social media people. It's politicians. It's media. And they're on Poilievre's case saying, denounce this guy, denounce this guy. If you don't denounce him, you support him. That's moving the goalposts again. That's not even just you were shaking hands. Now you are obligated to denounce. And I really hope, and so far, that Poilievre maintains his ground. He says, I don't support racists, and that's all he's going to say, case closed. Because you start dancing like a monkey for them, and that's what they want.
Yep.
Well, I denounced that one. Well, then they're going to go through old pictures and find out, why didn't you denounce that? Oh, I'll denounce that too. You've lost the narrative forever.
Mhm.
You're done, because they're just going to it's never enough.
Yeah.
He's got to hold his ground because there's a precedent getting set here. And if they get away with this, he's going to be that much weaker.
So before I come to the Liberals, I want to talk about this maybe in the broader context of cancel culture and the woke mob on social media, that kind of thing. Most conservatives in Canada, in the United States, Britain, really around the Anglosphere, when there's any allegation made from the other side that you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a misogynist, an Islamophobe, a homophobe, a transphobe, whatever your ism or ist or phobe is, conservatives instantly scurry under a rock and they cradle, they curl up and they scream, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. Hey, look, here's my token, insert X group friend. And they kind of go out of their ways, and it's just pathetic. It's grubby and demeaning. And the left wins every time because they're playing their game. They are playing their role in the denouncement game. They're playing the role of the sinner in the Church of Woke, seeking forgiveness, seeking absolution, and only they can give it, and they'll never give it to you regardless. Poilievre, though, took a very different tack in this. He said what you said there, Cory. I don't know the guy. I denounce racism. I don't know the guy at all, whatever. But he also said one more thing, and this sentence was left out from a lot of the mainstream media. They only used the first sentence, a lot of them at least, used only the first sentence of his statement, and his statement was very short. The second statement was something to the effect of, just as I cannot be held responsible for the outbursts of racism from the Prime Minister because I've shaken his hand. Now, I thought that was just a cutting and defiant way to come at this. It just puts it straight back on the left that you guys support the most well-known serial blackface wearer on the planet today. It was Nigel, I'm interested in your perspective on this because you've worked in the Prime Minister's office for quite a while. You're involved in the communications as a speechwriter. This is a totally different tactic. It's not the groveling that you would see from an O'Toole kind of conservative or really almost any conservative now, because the conservatives are so afraid of this stuff. What do you think about this as a tactic? and an alternative tactic to how most conservatives respond to allegations that they're mean.
We'll see how it works out. It needs to work out. One day somebody has got to, and I think this may be the time that is happening. Somebody says, no, I just reject your premise right at the start. I don't know the guy. I'm not a racist. Go ask somebody else. No, I'm not winking at it. And he can say that because everybody knows that Pierre Poilievre has never done, said, or had a racist thought. They won't give him any credit, but I mean, his wife was not born in Canada. This is not a guy who thinks in those
Best
terms.
I know, he's never worn blackface.
Best we know, he never has, and so he's clean. So I think he's the one of the people who can really take that tack if he wants to, and it appears that he does. And I applaud him for it.
So
but when you say it doesn't work anymore, guys, then it stops.
There's been a lot of unfair comparisons of Poilievre to Trump. Most of them are pretty ridiculous. They're just radically different characters. There's some things about Trump I like and some things I don't. The one thing I did like is that, when they throw these isms and phobes at him, he was the first guy to weaponize it back at them. He rejected the premise and went straight at them and turned it into an offensive weapon. He turned a shield into a sword. And I think we're seeing that maybe in a bit more classy way. I think Poilievre is not quite as bombastic. But Cory, do you think there's success to be had here, or is this too risky? Because the media seem to take what Poilievre is saying as, well, maybe he is winking at white supremacists.
My thoughts, I'm not so much in trying to turn it around in my view, rather than he should just dismiss, say it's a done deal and ignore it. I know it seems like that they'll keep coming at you, but you know what? You defang them. If you keep giving it oxygen, when you throw it back, you're keeping the issue going. And when he's made his statement, he said, "I'm not a racist. I don't know this guy. I'm done with it."
But he did throw it back.
I know,
with
and
his statement around Trudeau.
I'm not big on two wrongs making a right, because we're just keeping that vitriolic atmosphere going.
What would be the second wrong?
The second wrong was just going into, let's go into Trudeau and his blackface and handshaking. I know it's an example.
But it's something he actually did.
It was a nice shot, and that's fine. But I'm saying I don't know if going on the offense necessarily on this is the best policy. Like, just to use a smaller comparison, I got into soup on Twitter, shocker there, with a bunch of trans activists, and they went ballistic on me. Some trans activist with hundreds of thousands of followers sent her lunatics after me. I didn't respond to a single one of them, though, when they were tweeting at me. I just block, and they went crazier. And then it died off.
Well, when it comes
to tried to debate them,
trolls on
I'd still
Twitter,
be at it right now.
I've got a ban list on Twitter that is half the users on Twitter are banned on my account. I love banning because I don't engage with those nutters.
There's just no time.
But in this, you had just the whole full weight of the legacy media in Canada come down on them. You have the Liberals and the NDP coming down on them. I don't know. I think an offensive, a counter-offensive is the right move here, because if you just try and dismiss it, they're not going to let it go. You've got to come back hard and demonstrate to people that you're not taking the guff.
Yeah, for Pierre, that is exactly the right approach to take, because everybody who has supported Pierre this far would not appreciate, what was it, groveling, sniveling? The
self-flagellation.
Self-flagellation, they know they've signed up for a reason. They like the guy. They trust him. And if he breaks faith with that basic trust of who you are, sir, then the enthusiasm is gone. I've often, who's that British radio host who called out Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex?
I don't know.
Oh yeah, there was he made a.
You have to tell us about things British.
Well,
Dave would have known.
We have a policy of actually a minimum one British guy on the pipeline at all times. You can't tell from the accent, but Dave is a British subject.
He produced tea and biscuits at 3:00. I thought that was very classy. So
he did.
That's anyway. Yeah,
I do schnitzel and beer at 5.
So look, it cost the guy his job. Piers Morgan is the name I'm struggling for, and it cost him his job. But he got another one. Piers is out there, and meanwhile, somebody had just said enough. I think that's what sometimes you have to do. This will not cost Pierre Poilievre his job.
I actually think he
may even have picked up.
I think so, or at the very least, it shores up support, because I think you've got. I think the pendulum has begun to swing back against the woke here.
They're overplaying. They're getting way
They've
too
overplayed. They've loaded popular culture with junk, preachy lecturing that everyone's sick of. Everyone is now seeing good, decent people chased out of careers because they've said the wrong word. Sometimes they actually maybe said something that wasn't good, but we're humans. We can make mistakes, but they don't believe in redemption. I think he's tapping into something here. I don't think he should maybe go necessarily as far as Trump has gone at times, but because he has to have his own style. He isn't Trump. He's got to be Pierre. And Pierre's brand is feisty, witty, sharp, quick. And so I think he had exactly the right response here. I think he was. I think ignoring it would be wrong. I think it would
be
keep
wrong
the story
for him
going.
in this case.
Well, I'm not saying ignore it altogether.
No.
Just not a racist. I don't know the guy. Now the case is closed. But every time you open your mouth in defense, even if it's offense, it's got oxygen again.
Because if you don't have any offense on it, just saying I'm not a racist, and the media can ask you that question every day, and then you've just got 1,000 clips of you saying I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist.
No, and then after you've said it once, I've answered that. Next question. I've answered that. Next question. We're done. We're done. It's just kind of as Nigel said, that it's not even a good premise. It's done. It's not. I don't have time for it.
I think people are looking, not just ignoring it. They want someone to bite back, and I think there's just a huge group of people, not just in Canada, but right across the Western world, who are looking for exactly that kind of thing, but to do it in a way that's not demagogic. And I think that's what we saw.
It gets hard. Max Fawcett, who's ostensibly a columnist, who was a staffer for Rachel Notley.
Sorry, I thought you said communist.
No, well, that could be.
Okay.
He was a staffer for Notley, so you kind of see where he's landing. And he wrote, of course, see, this was losing steam, and as we said, Poilievre wouldn't rise to them as they hoped. So he writes one saying, well, Poilievre isn't a racist, perhaps, but why does he draw so many racists to him? So now it's his fault that they even show up at these things. And again, you see, the game just keeps going. And what's Poilievre supposed to do, though? Acknowledge this clown and even answer to that? Or it's just, he's going to write it anyway. And if you acknowledge it and fire it, he'll write something worse. Just listen.
Well, that's why I think you go on the offensive. You take this thing, because they're just so used to bashing us over the head with it. You take it and you turn it into a weapon. You stab them right back with it. I think that's what people want to see. Okay. Well, that was fun. Before we go, I want to remind you, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you really need to be. The Western Standard, actually, as of this week, is the only Western-based media company in all of Canada, the only one west of Mississauga to have a parliamentary bureau. Think about that. Between Vancouver and the western border of Mississauga, which is a Toronto suburb, sorry, Mississauga, but you are, there is not a single media outlet, unless I'm mistaken, that has a bureau on Parliament Hill directly themselves. The Winnipeg Free Press just shut theirs down this week. And that leaves the Western Standard as the only Western eyes and ears on Parliament Hill. The Western Standard, by chance, is also one of an extraordinarily small number of media that refuse to take the federal government's media bailout. We're one of the only media companies in the country that do not work for the federal government. But we're able to do that because of people like you becoming members. So if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news/membership. You can become a member for just $10 a month or $100 a year. And with that, you're going to get unlimited access to all of our content. Just the other day, the Calgary Sun had, I think, about 2 articles published in a day. That same day, we had 35 pieces of original journalism. And you're going to get it for a fraction of the price, and you're going to do it without supporting media companies that work for the federal government. So please support the work we're doing and help us to continue to grow and expand as we have so incredibly over the last year. That's it for today. Nigel, Cory.
Great to be here.
Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Great debut. And thank all of you for joining us, and God bless.
On Thursday, August 25th, the Alberta Prosperity Project and Rebel News are hosting a special UCP Leadership Dinner and Forum at the Edmonton Convention Centre. We're asking the UCP leadership candidates tough but fair questions, like how will they protect our rights and freedoms from the United Nations Agenda 2030 and World Economic Forum's Great Reset? How will they fight the climate change initiative? And how will they counter inflation? You won't want to miss this event. Get your ticket today at www.albertaprosperityproject.com.